The crunch of gravel under my tires fell off. Something was different. As I rounded the last bend of Maple Ridge Road, the familiar sight of my family's wheat fields should have greeted me. Instead, a monstrous 3-story hotel stood where golden crops once swayed in the wind. Its glass windows reflected the setting sun, gleaming like 1,000 watchful eyes. I slammed on the brakes. My hands gripped the steering wheel, so tightly my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just a mistake. This was theft. I had been gone only 1 month. 30 days away for a crucial consulting job in Singapore, one my family desperately needed. Before leaving, my wife, Sarah, and I had secured everything. Or so we thought. Now, our family's 4-generation farm had vanished, buried beneath concrete, steel, and greed. A group of construction workers in hard hats bustled about like busy ants. Bright yellow "No Trespassing" signs lined the property. A massive billboard read, "Welcome to the Willowbrook Suites, approved by HOA." And beneath it, one name stood out, Karen Reynolds, HOA president and project director. My stomach twisted into a knot. Karen, the woman who had been trying to push us out for years. The woman who had complained about our unkempt boundaries, who sent endless letters about grass height violations, who always eyed our land like it was hers to take. I stepped out of my car, my boots landing on what used to be my land. A construction worker noticed me and hesitated, then approached. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, clipboard tucked under his arm. I took a deep breath. My voice was calm, but firm. "Yeah, I think you can. Why is there a hotel on my farm?" His eyes widened. You're Richard Holloway?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Sarah. "Richard, emergency. Call me ASAP." My heart pounded as I stared at the hotel that shouldn't exist and the name of the woman who put it there. Karen Reynolds had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The moment I walked into town, I could feel the stares, the whispers. At the local coffee shop, I ordered black coffee and sat at the farthest booth, spreading out a notepad. Dates, questions, observations. I needed to connect the dots. How had Karen done this so fast? "Rough day?" The waitress, Martha, refilled my cup, her voice filled with something else. Pity? Guilt? I looked up at her, then back at the hotel, looming in the distance. "Just getting started," I said, and I meant it. That's when Marcus, my longtime friend and lawyer, slid into the seat across from me. He didn't bother with small talk. He simply tossed a file onto the table. "You're going to want to see this," he said. Inside were zoning documents, permits, and construction approvals, all stamped and signed off by the HOA. "They did this while you were gone," Marcus muttered. "They reclassified your farmland as part of a community improvement zone. You never got the notice because it was approved at an emergency HOA meeting you weren't there for." A cold rage settled in my chest. They had planned this. They had waited for me to leave. Karen had used the oldest trick in the book. Push paperwork through while the owner is unaware. Then by the time they come back, it's too late. Except she hadn't counted on me fighting back. That night, I went to the one place Karen and her HOA hadn't bulldozed, the barn. Inside was my grandfather's old filing cabinet, covered in dust but untouched. I pulled open the rusted drawers, revealing dozens of maps, deeds, and legal documents spanning over 70 years. And then I found it. An original hand-drawn property map from 1952, marked with our farm's boundaries and legally notarized. It predated the HOA formation by decades. Beside it was a sealed envelope, yellow with age. Written in my grandfather's careful handwriting was a single line, "For when they try to take what is ours." I carefully opened the letter. Inside, my grandfather had detailed a legal defense he had prepared years ago, foreseeing a day when outsiders might try to claim our land. "Knowledge is your best weapon," he had written, "and I've left you plenty." I exhaled sharply, feeling a fire I hadn't in years. Karen had no idea she had just walked into a legal trap set generations ago. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Karen hadn't just taken my land. She had been quietly expanding HOA control for years, using fake community improvement projects to take property from unsuspecting owners. I found old meeting minutes where she pushed for changes that favor developers. I found letters of complaint from other homeowners who had mysteriously disappeared from town soon after. And then I found a mistake. A series of land transfers that were incomplete. Karen had never legally finished transferring my land into HOA control, meaning the hotel was built on land that still belonged to me, and that gave me all the leverage I needed. As I stepped out of the barn, headlights flickered in the distance. A car slowly drove past my property, pausing for just a second too long. Karen, even in the dark, I could see her silhouette, the glow of her expensive designer glasses catching the moonlight. She was watching, waiting. She thought she had won, but the battle had just begun. The next morning, I walked straight into the HOA office, slammed my legal documents onto Karen's desk, and smiled. Her expression barely changed, but I saw it. The flicker of doubt, the brief moment of fear. "You built your hotel on my land," I said, "and now I'm going to take everything from you." She swallowed hard. For the first time, Karen Reynolds looked truly afraid, because she knew what was coming next. Karen didn't say a word as she stared at the stack of legal documents I had just slammed onto her desk. The once smug and untouchable HOA president looked as if someone had just pulled the ground from under her. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "You built your hotel on my land, and now I'm going to make you pay for it." She finally blinked and adjusted her designer glasses, her hands tightening around the armrests of her chair. Her composure was cracking, but Karen was a fighter. She wasn't about to roll over. "This is ridiculous," she scoffed, forcing a smirk. "Our paperwork is airtight." "Actually," I said, pulling out another document from my briefcase, "yours is incomplete. The transfer of my land was never finalized. Legally, that hotel belongs to me." Her face lost all color. For the first time, she knew she had underestimated me. And she knew I wasn't bluffing. Karen wasn't just a bully. She was a manipulator who thrived on controlling the narrative. If I wanted to win this fight, I had to take control of the story before she did. That night, I met with Jack Miller, a journalist for the local newspaper, the Willowbrook Herald. He listened intently as I laid out everything. The illegal zoning change, the hotel's environmental violations, and Karen's history of shady deals. Jack's face lit up. "This isn't just a local story," he said. "This will blow up statewide." The next morning, the front page of the Willowbrook Herald read, "HOA land scandal, hotel built on stolen property." The article spread like wildfire. Social media exploded. People who had been too scared to speak up against Karen before were now coming forward with their own horror stories. A small business owner claimed she'd been forced to sell her bakery because of endless HOA fines. An elderly couple revealed how they were harassed into leaving their home so Karen could rezone the area for new townhouses. A former HOA board member anonymously admitted that Karen threatened members who disagreed with her. Karen tried to do damage control. She called a press conference claiming this was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence was stacking against her. And the best part? I wasn't even done yet. Karen thought she could bulldoze my farm into history, but in her arrogance, she forgot one critical thing. The land she had built her precious hotel on? It was a legally protected wetland. After digging through historical property records, my lawyer Marcus had uncovered an old environmental zoning law. The land couldn't be developed without a full environmental impact study. Karen had skipped that step, and the punishment for that? Hundreds of thousands in fines. A potential demolition order. Possible criminal charges. Marcus contacted the state environmental agency, and within 48 hours, they sent out inspectors to the hotel site. The result? The hotel was declared an environmental hazard. Karen was now facing a massive lawsuit from the state, and she was running out of options. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Karen walked in wearing her signature power suit, her expression carefully neutral, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew she was losing. Marcus and I sat across from her, our evidence ready. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Elizabeth Hartman, wasted no time. "Mr. Holloway," she said, turning to me, "please present your case." I stood, my voice steady. "Your Honor, My family's farm has existed for 4 generations. The HOA, led by Ms. Reynolds, unlawfully rezoned my land, approved a hotel construction without my consent, and in the process, violated state environmental laws. I handed over the property maps, zoning records, and environmental reports. Karen's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, the HOA acted in the best interest of the community. But Judge Hartman wasn't having it. Is it in the best interest of the community, she interrupted, to build a hotel on a protected wetland without proper permits? Silence. I glanced at Karen. She was shaking. The judge turned to Karen. Ms. Reynolds, can you explain why the HOA did not conduct a proper environmental assessment before approving construction? Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, she was truly speechless. The ruling was swift and brutal. The hotel was declared illegally built and was to be demolished. The HOA was fined $500,000 for violating environmental laws. Karen was removed as HOA president and faced a personal lawsuit from homeowners she had wronged. The moment the ruling was announced, a wave of relief washed over me. I had done it. I had saved my family's land. But more than that, I had exposed a corrupt system that had been ruining people's lives for years. Karen stormed out courtroom, humiliated and defeated. And as I walked outside, greeted by cheers from the community, I knew one thing for certain. No one would ever steal from my family again. Karen had lost a battle, but she was too proud to admit defeat. A few weeks after the trial, a letter arrived at my doorstep. Reynolds and Associates. Legal representation for Karen Reynolds. Subject, counter lawsuit notice. I sighed as I read it. I knew she wouldn't go down quietly. Sarah read over my shoulder, shaking her head. She's suing you? Not just me. I muttered. She's trying to overturn the ruling entirely. Karen's new legal team argued that the HOA had acted in the best interest of the community. The hotel provided economic benefits that outweighed Richard's land rights. The environmental impact claims were exaggerated. This wasn't just about revenge. Karen was trying to rewrite history. And if she won, it would set a precedent. The HOA could steal more land, more homes, and push out more families. I wasn't going to let that happen. Karen had thrown one last desperate punch, but I had one last knockout blow. I sat at my kitchen table, going through every old document my grandfather had left. I needed something bigger, something stronger. Then I found it, an old manila envelope, sealed with wax. I carefully opened it, revealing a handwritten letter. Richard, if you're reading this, it means someone tried to take our land. What they don't realize is that this land isn't just ours. It was never meant to be sold, rezoned, or changed. I furrowed my brow. What was he talking about? Then I saw it, a legal document attached to the letter. My land wasn't just a farm. It was part of a historical land trust. This meant that the land could never be rezoned, sold, or developed without special federal approval. Any construction on it without permission was automatically illegal. Anyone involved in the violation, including the HOA and city officials, could face massive federal fines. Karen's hotel wasn't just illegal. It was a violation of federal law. I immediately called Marcus, my lawyer. Marcus, I said, my voice shaking with excitement. Karen just walked into federal trouble. He chuckled. She thought she could fight dirty. She just buried herself alive. Karen's appeal hearing was scheduled for the next week. She thought she had a chance. She thought she could convince the judge that her hotel deserved to stay. What she didn't know was that I had already contacted the U.S. Land Trust Authority. By the time we walked into the courtroom, federal investigators were already involved. Karen sat across from me, her new lawyer at her side, looking confident. But that changed when the federal land official stood up. Your Honor, he said, we have been presented with overwhelming evidence that the Willowbrook Hotel was constructed in violation of federal land trust protections. Karen's jaw dropped. This means that this is no longer a simple zoning dispute. This is a federal land crime. You could hear a pin drop in the courtroom. The judge was furious. Ms. Reynolds, she said, you knowingly approved a project that violated federal land trust laws? Karen stammered. I didn't. Silence. The judge snapped. This is beyond a civil case now. I'm referring this to federal authorities. Karen looked like she might faint. Her lawyer stood up, visibly sweating. Your Honor, my client was not aware. No excuses. The judge cut him off. This court is ordering an immediate and permanent ruling. The hotel remains demolished. The land is fully restored, and any further HOA actions against Mr. Holloway's property are permanently prohibited. Then, she dropped the hammer. Furthermore, I am ordering a full audit of the Willowbrook HOA. The entire courtroom gasped. Karen's eyes darted around wildly. She wasn't just losing. Her entire empire was crumbling. I sat back in my chair, a slow smile creeping onto my face. Karen had finally lost. 3 months later, the Willowbrook HOA was completely dismantled. Karen Reynolds was charged with fraudulent land zoning practices, facing state and federal lawsuits. The city council members who supported her resigned in disgrace. And my farm? It stood exactly where it had always been. Sarah and I sat on the wooden porch, watching the sun set over the wheat fields. She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. You did it! I exhaled slowly, taking in the quiet victory. No, my grandfather did. His careful records, his legal foresight, his belief that no one should be able to take what isn't theirs. Karen thought she could rewrite history. She thought she could bury the past. But she forgot one thing. Some legacies are unbreakable. And no HOA was ever going to take mine. This wasn't just about winning a lawsuit. This was about standing up to corruption. Karen believed no one would fight back. She thought she could get away with it. She underestimated the power of knowledge, persistence, and a community that refused to be bullied. Because in the end, bullies only win when no one stands up to them.